People make promises to us, and if we can elevate our sensitivity to when we're making promises and when others are, we can increase the reliability about the promises.
Welcome to Leadership Impact, the podcast for modern executives who are reinventing leadership within their organizations. With your host, executive leadership coach and CEO of the Granger Network, Kari Granger, and me, Paul Adams, CEO of Sound Financial Group. This episode continues our series on coordinating with precision. Are you keeping your promises?
Welcome back to the Leadership Impact. This is Kari Granger, and I'm joined again by Paul Adams. And we're continuing our mini-series on coordinating with precision. It's the very thing that produces the results in our organizations. And this week, we're going to look at what happens when we have sloppy agreements, sloppy promises. Last week, we spoke about requests and how to really increase the probability others around you are taking action by actually making a request. Well, the other side of a request is a promise. You know, when somebody accepts your request, they make a promise. You don't have to have a request for a promise, but a promise is, look, I am going to take this action and with these kinds of specifications, and here's by when I'm going to take that action. And, rather than strong promises, sometimes we're burdened with sloppy promises. So that's what we're going to talk about today, is turning those into pretty strong promises.
Well, and I would say that as a leader, there's two things I took away from the last podcast that really gripped me. One is that I might come in and do an inspirational talk and people leave, maybe being inspired, but with no action, which leaves me then circling back several weeks later, thinking they should have done a bunch of stuff and I should all over them in my, well, you should have done this, you should have done that. So that's awful for the relationship and for the future. And to also just reflecting since we recorded the last one is that it's real close, giving that inspirational talk with no requests being nailed down and nobody committing to any action. I may as well maybe just walked into the room and had a really large burp. It gets an emotional reaction and nobody commits to doing anything. It's like a Barney from Simpsons that shakes the lips kind of burp would have produced the same outcome as that inspirational conversation if nobody committed to any action at all. So hence the components of somebody saying they're going to do something or promising.
Yeah, sure. It's specific what action I'm going to take, and to what, in what time frame. So I'm going to take this action in this time frame. Now, what makes a great promise, a complete promise, an accountable promise, is to also have somewhere either stated or stated somewhere else in the background, clear criteria for success. So, I'm gonna produce a strategy for developing our internal team. I'm going to have it to you by April 1st. And now if I make that request, or if I make that promise, you don't really know what to expect, right? Mm-hmm. So I could say, and my thought on the matter is that provide an analysis on each of the team members, what I recommend in terms of the training and developing they receive, and a link to where to get that training. In other words, I'm giving you the specifications of what I promise. Mm. Otherwise, you might just get, well, I think we ought to train people monthly, right? So there's no real specifications. Yeah. So it's a specific what and a by when. And to bolster that, to make it better, is to increase, is to provide some criteria for success, so specifications. And that's, by the way, is going to be really important in what we talk about on our next episode, which is how do you follow up? How can you bring some accountability? How can you follow up with somebody who doesn't do what they say they're going to do? Well, if you haven't aligned on that criteria for success, then it's kind of tough to have that follow-up conversation, right?
I hear, so what actions, when will those actions be taken? So I wrote what actions, what time, and criteria for success, but I want to ask, again, our audience has heard me talk about just wanting to create some rubrics where I can put this stuff to work right away. Would you say that would be like, can you describe what it will look like as the criteria for success? Because one of the things I realized as you even just role played that, I'm like, I would ask, and I think co-create that criteria for success by being able to ask, well, are you going to do that in Excel? Are you going to use Google Sheets? Are you going to use one of the project management tools of many that our listeners use to be able to produce what you're going to give me the feedback on when you get that to me next Tuesday? It seems like that even describing what it might start to look like starts to put some barriers on what the conditions for success are. But are there criteria for success? Is that close?
No, I love asking that question, actually. We have right now, we're developing an online course for one of our clients. And, one of the things that we do a lot with almost all the time, actually, is that we co-create with our clients. It's a partnership together. And as we started to speak about, well, what does this internal online course look like? And we began to discuss, what does success look like? All sorts of assumptions came up, all sorts of great ideas that I had never even thought of came up. So I think when you actually get specific about what does it look like to do this well, and by the way, you can also have a conversation. What does this look like to not do this well, which provides some awesome contrast.
Yes.
There's this great co-creation that happens that starts to bring a level of precision that just wasn't there. And here's the thing. I know it takes upfront work, and there's got to be people rolling their eyes. Like, seriously, I just need them to get the report done. Right?
Yes.
But if you do this work up front, you're not dealing with it afterwards when you're dissatisfied.
Well, and the thing that works for me that I could see locking in the new behavior, it might be helpful to some of our audience, is that realizing that if I don't do that front end work, then whatever the quote unquote, as we talked about in our last episode, the inspirational speech with, scary quotes around it, the inspirational speech I gave actually ended up having no use. And there's nothing that bothers me personally more than feeling like I exerted energy somewhere, got someone to understand and engage something, and then made zero difference for them. I can even see it on a personal level, just a friend that's dealing with a problem and getting them to see new context, see new situation, and then not pausing, going, okay, what are you going to do?
Yeah, I used to do these 2-day offsites with my clients, and they were kind of these turn the ship around offsites. I think we've talked about this before, but you come in culturally, whatever, and you really shift the whole culture, and people are ready to take action, and they're inspired by a new future, and then I take off like I've done my job. And what I found is just the work of execution, of implementation is totally different than that of creation. And so I won't do just 2 days anymore. You gotta see me for 6 months to a year, right? I won't do just 2 days because of what you just said. The work of the implementation of taking ideas into action is a skill set, a totally different skill set, requires a different mindset, and requires you to pay attention to different things. When I'm in the mode of creating the future and having conversations and inspiring, which, I'd actually argue, Paul, is different than a burp, because the mood is so different. It's actually really important. It gives people meaning. It has people see a future for themselves, which is really compelling. Doing that does make a difference. And I don't want you to downplay it too much. It's just that you've now got to add the skill of translation. And if you don't have that, you got to know you don't have that. And, bring your colleagues, bring somebody in to make sure they're partnering with you.
Oh my gosh. And I could be wrong, but could you just ask, like, if I feel inept to build those outcomes, could I just ask, like, hey, who here can take over this conversation now that we're where we're at and translate this to action?
Well, yeah, absolutely. And just even asking that question, can you see, takes a different kind of looking. Like, now we have to turn this into something.
Yes.
We need to listen for promises, right? That itself takes a different looking. It takes a different paying attention to, there's a shift that needs to happen here.
So we know that when we make a request, we talked about this in the last episode, that we are listening for somebody making they accept, and the request involved a by when. So they say yes, which means they agreed to the what, they agreed to the time, and hopefully we have a shared interpretation of what the criteria for success is. They could counter, which they could counter on the action, on the time, or the criteria for success. They could decline it, or they could make a definitive deferral that would be like almost like a commit to commit or not later.
Which, to translate that into English, means, means I can't commit right now. Got to check my calendar. Got to talk with some people, but I will get back to you by Friday. And in a sense, that's a promise, right? I will get back to you by Friday. But let's talk about making promises. Can we do that?
Yes. Well, the first thing I was thinking of is how much I think people don't realize, even though their language might be making promises, that people are so unaware of it, that when somebody who has maybe been somewhat undependable now says they're going to do something, they say, listen, Kari, I absolutely promise. I swear on my, fill in the loved one's graves blank that I will do X. That to me exemplifies how much people don't realize that they may be making promises all kinds of places. They're just not taking them seriously.
Yeah, for sure. And, how do we do that? Right. We talked a little bit about this on the episode in which we said we got to start with no. Right. But in a different context, okay, don't worry. I'll do my best. I'll try. Yeah, man, that sounds wonderful. I can't wait to see that happen. All these ways that we avoid making promises, or to your point, we make promises and we're not even aware of it. I can't tell you the number of things that end up in my calendar that I made some promise and I didn't realize I did. And then pretty soon they've contacted my assistant and they're in my calendar, right?
Yes.
Like, oh, hey, I'd love to talk to you sometime. Yep, that sounds great. Now, I think I'm specifically avoiding making a promise, but they just heard that as a definitive promise.
That's right.
Right. And now, I'm driving like an hour away to meet with somebody and I'm like, oh my gosh. Right. But that happens because we're making promises all the time. And when we don't realize we made promises and people are counting on us for those promises, it makes for sloppy coordination.
Yep.
Because Amber not delivering on her promise means that Ben can't keep his promise to Kathy. And because Amber didn't deliver on her promise, Ben's now scrambling to meet his, and Kathy doesn't know that her plan is at risk.
Because nobody's talking about it. Like that hers won't get fulfilled. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So here's the kind, when we make promises, it's like we're on the hook. Right. So I just make you a promise. Like you said, I vow, I promise you, I will get this. Something happens physically, right? It's like all of a sudden I feel it in my gut, like, ooh, I just made a promise. Like I really made a promise. And so, both with ourselves, what are all the ways that we kind of let ourselves off the hook, or we're not even aware we're making promises, and then people are counting on our promises? As soon as you make a promise, it's like people's world shifts, right? When you and I, when we have a contract, that's a promise. I'm already counting on that revenue and I've already made decisions based on that. And we haven't even done the transaction yet, just the promise.
Yes.
So we make promises. People make promises to us. And if we can elevate our sensitivity to when we're making promises and when others are, we can increase the reliability about the promises. So I hear in others when people make kind of a half-ass promise, or one of those where it's like, I don't know if are they really aware they just made that promise? But my sensitivity is up a lot, so I'm not going to count on it. Right? Or if I need to count on it, I might ask a few more questions, until I can kind of get that sense that, yes, I'm clear and I'm awake and I'm present, that I just made a promise to you to do something very specific to certain criteria by a certain date, and that's a promise.
And I think that people are so unused to it, because I've watched Though when people are used to, hey, we should get together. Yeah, we should get together. And then when you say, well, let's get out our calendars and schedule it then. Or if you say, hey, listen, it's not that I don't want to chat with you, but my calendar is really, really unbelievably committed right now. I would be open to either doing a short phone call while, I'm driving, or can we schedule something in 3 months to have that coffee or whatever you're requesting? And you can see that people are so used to everybody just kind of like giving the verbal high five of, yes, we intend to, and walking away feeling good, that if you ground people in the actual commitment, you see it's so uncommon. You actually see the discomfort a little bit.
Yeah. And so why even do this, right? Why make ourselves uncomfortable?
Mm-hmm.
Why put ourselves on the hook? Promises, in a certain way, how we're known in the world is connected to our promise. And how we're even known to ourselves is connected to our promise. I was just reviewing one of my team members' performance review. And one of the things this team member said is like, man, I am feeling like a failure. I can't seem to even trust my own word in fulfilling on my promises. I'm promising so much and not fulfilling on it. Well, her very identity, how she knows herself and how others know her, is connected to the promises that she makes or fulfills on. And trust. I even notice that now when this person promises something, I've got like a 50-50 on if it's going to happen or not. So I don't take actions based on this person's promise, right? Now,
yes,
of course, she's identified it. We're like looking at how can we get this person some support to make it happen. But promises are connected to our very identity in the world for ourselves and others, and the level of trust people have with us. When we don't complete our promises, that also creates an identity. And when we do make promises and fulfill on them, that leads to an identity and it leads to trust.
Yes. Well, and now leaving our listeners with something that I hope to be really powerful around the idea of promises. And I would say the awareness of whether or not you made one or somebody else made one is one, when you end those interactions, whether that's a meeting or just a casual side conversation, if you think a promise might have been made, so is it okay if I check in with you in a, whatever the date was, in 3 days to see if that's complete yet? Because it allows them to reset and realize that they made a promise without maybe going, is that a promise? Like, and having that weird, awkward setting. And second would be to ask them, is there anything you're leaving this meeting with that you're counting on from me?
Yeah.
Or to make it real easy, have your whole team listen to this podcast and then you have a cup of coffee with them and talk about it so you guys can be in the shared language, which I know we're going to get to at some point, is how much that shared language and background of distinctions speeds up nearly every interaction you have with your team.
Yeah, absolutely. Paul, that did remind me, I know we're getting ready to close up this episode, but one of the things, just a practice that we do on our team, is we have something that we called an action commitment form. You call it like a promise form, right? And at the end of every meeting, we have the person who's our scribe, the person kind of who's taken notes, just read off, here are the promises that were made, who made them, and then we get it clear when they're going to happen. So we just, at the end of our meeting, we hold about 5 minutes at the end to review all the promises made. And sometimes people go, oh yeah, I guess I did make that promise. When can I do that? Let's see here. And then they throw out a date.
Yes.
But it's just an easy practice that actually has people aware. And then we send that form out, after the meeting, and then, a few hours before the meeting, so people are ready to account for their promises.
I love that. And if nothing else, being able to have, whether or not you have a scribe in your company that can hold that role, or you just call it like, who's our promise listener this meeting?
Yep.
And I could see that even be a rotating role, except it should probably never rotate to me in my company, because I'll think everybody promised the moon to me.
But they'd review it. They say, no, Paul, I didn't
That's
promise
right.
that. It'd actually be great for you to do that.
I think you're right. So but for everybody to take away with this week, at the end of your interactions, the end of a meeting, what commitments were made by who, and were they promises? Did they have a what was going to get done, by when it was going to get done, and what that might look like? What's the criteria for success that the people on the receiving end of the promise would share as it being completed and completed well? I think for most of us, if you went through your meetings last week in your calendar, it may be hard to find all the promises that were made. And that if you can leave this week understanding what the promises were that were made to you and what promises you made, I think where you'd be left is with an increase to your leadership impact. Thank you again, Kari. Thank you for tuning in to Leadership Impact, the podcast for modern executives who are reinventing leadership within their organizations. Subscribe now at grangernetwork.com or wherever you get your podcasts. And to support you in your leadership impact, we've created an exclusive set of guiding questions on today's topic. Just text the word promise to 900-900 and you'll receive the link. If you like what you're hearing, you will love our online courses, which will transform your performance and leadership over 4 months with videos, practices, and group Q&As. These online courses are our approach to essential leadership development for professionals. Learn more at grangernetwork.com and join us for our next episode on Coordinating with Precision.